Ruchem aboim b'shem Hashem. Baruch Shechiyonu v'Kiryonu Yonu Azman Hazeh, in the 31st year of the Shiur Torah's annual summertime evening Shiurim in Flatbush, Borough Park, and Williamsburg. Yasher Koach to everyone for coming in person, everyone joining us on the phone and beyond. To have the great schus of sponsoring one of the Shiurim, please contact Shiur Torah at 718-851-8651 or email ist@yeshivanet.com. Tonight we have the cover to have with us once again Rabbi Fischel Schachter, Shlita, noted Magid Shiur, to speak on staying normal in a world gone mad. I'd like to give big Yeshiva to Rabbi Parnas for sponsoring tonight's Shiur. It's my cover to call on Rabbi Schachter for tonight's Rosha.
Yes, go ahead. Okay, Shalom Aleichem. I love once a year events. I like them very much because it gives kind of gives an opportunity of Dial-a-daf, thanking Hashem for the past, that you made it through the last year. I guess after a year your voice changes, so the echo takes on a different... So you give it was good, you know. Should have left it the same setting as last year. Too many people touch it, huh? Says he did leave it at the same setting as last year. Other people touched it. Yes. Watching on the camera. I just went to get a box of tissues. Don't panic. Didn't get angry at anyone. Didn't run away. Are we okay? We're okay. We still have an echo. We have a crack team over here. The greatest speakers and focused in on it. And I'm sure it's only a matter of time. Who's good with technology? Think Elon Musk is around? Think he'll know how to figure out the speaker system here in Boston? Could be it'll fly away, I don't know. Why don't we skip the microphone altogether? It's good. Okay. So as I was saying, I like once-a-year events because it gives a chance. You thank Hashem for the past year, and you're mispal for the next year. That goes for everybody here. We could all do the same thing. So tell me, Rabbi, say, how was your year? You went home in between the speeches last year now, right? You weren't sitting here the entire time. Okay. I remember I was in the bungalow colony once, and for whatever reason, we had to leave a Shabbos early. And my kids were very, very upset. And the 3-year-old was crying, and we had to go. It was a simcha, it was a good reason. And we left, and he's watching. Now they're going to have all the fun only after I leave. You hit 8 weeks, 10 weeks. Then, for whatever reason, Shem Mitzadeh Gever Kainonu V'Darka Yechbatz, the next year, we had to come a Shabbos late. The next year we had to come a Shabbos late. And I remember we got there, and my 3-year-old, he looks out the window, he bursts into crying, tears. He sees his friends in the sandbox. I said, what happened? He goes, they were here the whole year. You know what I mean? He left them there and comes back and they're there. He goes, he had to go back to the city, and they were here the whole year. You know what I mean? He was like, wasn't a very happy camper about that. I said, no, they were not here the whole year, even though you saw them in the same position when you left than when you came. Okay? They couldn't stay there. In those years in the bungalows, you couldn't stay there a whole year. Now you could, because now everyone has houses in the country. But not everyone has houses. I don't. But in those days, we had bungalows. They stood on 4 stilts on cinder blocks. Okay? And I remember we had one bungalow, one of the cinder blocks on the corner, one of the stilts was like off, and it was like the whole bungalow was like a shtickle wobbly. Okay? And I remember the bungalow colony owner came, and he said that there's just too much weight. We brought too much weight to the bungalow. I said, that's great. You know what I mean? I said, we had an extra piece of kugel, now the bungalow was going to turn over. It was one of those matzavim. Okay. I heard from Rabbi Hill Eisenberg. He said a beautiful story. He said that he was in Princeton, and he was giving, I guess, kiruv classes, and he was in a room, and he brought chicken and, Kentucky fried chicken. It's Kentucky, right? That's the state. And one person came in, one of the students, big guy. He didn't take a thing. So he said to him, what's the problem? It's not kosher enough for you? He said, it doesn't eat kosher. He says, maybe you should start, but like, what is the problem? So he says that he is on the Princeton rowing team. They have rowing competition. I guess the Ivy League universities aren't so into soccer and basketball. And he says that before he gets into the boat, the coach, or whatever you call the head of the rowing thing, everyone has to get onto a scale. And if you weigh too much, you could be thrown off the team because the boat is like perfectly balanced. He said, whatever I eat today, it was, as if there's an exact cheshbon. He says, I eat an extra piece of chicken and the whole boat is lopsided and we lose and Princeton loses the rowing team because of that. He says, I can't eat your chicken. I think it's a Mardika Musa Haskell. Imagine if we all assumed the achrayus that we have for each other. Imagine if we all assumed the achrayus that we have for each other. I'm not saying you shouldn't have an extra piece of chicken and don't worry about tilting the boat. But if we live this way, you know what, Rabbi Sai, I think we're all on a rowing team, right? So I'm sure you all had a life between last year and this year. A lot of things happen on this world from last year to this year. If we were going to ask the question, so what happened in the world over the last year? I think that if we would even begin to answer that question, there would be no time left because we would just be talking about the things that happened. So what happened, I think it's beyond anything you can analyze. But the Poel HaYoitze is that the world is definitely closer to Geula. The America-Iran peace talks, the memorandums of understanding. I said, President says, yes, we're signing another memorandum of understanding, we're getting closer and closer. In between, we're bombing each other. Normal thing, right? So we said it describes some marriages, but so you want to know what's going on in the world. Does anything make sense? The world is a tinderbox. It's scary. You read about pre-World War I, what the world looked like. If you want to know what's going on in the world, what's going on here in New York, read the primary results. And do we know? Sir Chaim Volozhiner once burst into tears. They asked him why he's bursting into tears. And it was uncharacteristic of him. But he said that whatever he had Ruach HaKodesh, however it came, and he said that America is the letzte Stanzia. He said America is going to be the last station. He says we're all going to go to America. Chaim Volozhiner's late 1700s, America, going to America. If I told you we were going to Mars, I think that would have made would have been more practical. And Reb Chaim was crying, and he was crying, and they said to Reb Chaim, why are you crying? So we'll go to America. If everyone goes to America, there'll be minyan there. You know what I mean? There'll be yeshivas there. So he said, you shouldn't know what it's going to take for the transplant to America, what we're going to go through. So America, right? Remember Rav Gifter, remember hearing Shmuzna from him, and he was saying, the letzte Stanzia. America is the last station. And that's a very important yesod, within itself. And we can't forget that. We are in a station. We're in a station. All the anti-Semitism that you hear, or you shouldn't hear, but things that were considered fringe, things that a politician wouldn't dare say publicly, although he would say it privately. And now they're not only boasting anti-Semitic conspiracy theories and so on, it's the basis of their re-election, if you think about what's going on. So understand that they're all shluchim of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. I don't want to mention them by name, they're not Zoichi, you should mention their names next to Aron Kodesh. They're all shluchim of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Because we have to remember America or anywhere else was never intended to be a home. It's a stansia, it's a station, a good station. And we're obligated to have a karas hatayv. We're obligated to recognize it in the nicest way as possible and be the best people that we can be and be Mekadosh Shem Shemayim. But at the end of the day, it's a station. Reb Nosson Wachtfeigl, right, Mashgiach in Lakewood, was living for Mashiach. So someone told me, whenever somebody wanted to give him a ride, this Yid told me, he would say, could I take the Rosh Yeshiva home? He would jump. Home? He says, you could take me to my stancia. Take me to my station in my station. Home, there's no home. This is not home. Wasn't intended to be home. Rav Nosson Wachtfeigl wasn't a person that was just timid. When he had to be, he was very powerful. He told my uncle, the Rosh Yeshiva in Los Angeles once, he said, they went over to him in Lakewood, he was still a Bacher, I think, or a young man, a Bacher, and he said to him, take me to Muncie. From Lakewood to Muncie. He says, I have to speak to the Vizhnitzer Rebbe. So he asked him, you have an appointment with the Vizhnitzer Rebbe? He said, no, but let's go. And they went, and he knocked on the door of the Vizhnitzer Rebbe's house. The kids answered the door, it was late at night. And he said, the Meshgiach of Lakewood is here, so the Rebbe said he should come in. Anyway, the Rebbe Reb Nosson was working very hard to get the kollel going in Los Angeles, and he wanted one particular Yingaman to go, and he wasn't ready to go yet. And he was, the family was a Vizhnitzer family. He told the Rebbe the whole thing is being held up by him. And the Rebbe is going to take care of it. He said, so Reb Nosson wasn't the person that just, Reb Nosson Wachtfeigl is a famous story that he once came into the Beis Medrash at 3 o'clock in the morning, and yes, there were Bachurim there, and he said, we have to say Tillim now. And they said Tillim a very, very long time. So when he finished, he turned around and started to leave, and made boy b'shalom and came back and said, we have to say Tillim again for Bachram. We have to say Tillim again. They said Tillim again. And then he said, okay. And then there was a commotion outside and everyone ran out and they heard what happened. There was a Bachar, let's call him Isaac, not his name. And apparently he was on his way, but he was in Manhattan. Why is a Bachar in Manhattan? I don't know, in a lounge, trying to fulfill, I guess, the mitzvah of Pru, trying to get married. And he's on his way back. He must have dropped off the Miduberes. And in Manhattan, this is pre-Waze, pre-GPS days. You know, GPSs get confused in Manhattan anyway. And he got it's a tumult. And there's a lot of side streets. If you take the wrong turn down a side street in Manhattan in the middle of the night, and I'm forever, when I come out of the Lincoln Tunnel, I'm doomed. But it's like detour, closed road. The GPS doesn't help me. My GPS, Bechlal, he'll go like, one of the roads on your route is closed. Would you like another route? That's a good question. No, I'll take the one that's closed. I never understood that question. But anyway, so say that in New York, the shortest distance between 2 points is a construction site, right? So in Manhattan, they have like these cobblestone streets, effective dead ends. And you have an arrow this way, and I don't know, this is exactly the problem that this Bacher encountered, but I remember coming out of the Lincoln Tunnel in the middle of the night, I don't know where I was, and then you see, there's like a sign, one way, 2 arrows pointing at each other. Like, wait, which one? You know what I mean? 2 one-way arrows, right? I was once in a doctor's office. There's a big clinic. Also, there were arrows this way, arrows that way, and I was looking for a certain department. At one point, the gentleman behind the desk, the doorman, was quite upset that I was interrupting whatever he was doing on the phone. And I asked him, where's Dr. So-and-so's office? He said, you can't read the signs? Now the signs, there was an arrow, and there were 2 arrows pointing at each other. Trying to figure it out. It's like I could read it, I don't know what it means. Okay? So when I finally found the office, and I was telling it to a friend of mine that was sitting there, also waiting, he says, you think that's a problem? What do you do when there's 2 doctors here? And they're both telling you opposite opinions. I said, I said, I'll tell you a story. Once I had with the Mishgiach, where I went to him and I said about a certain thing with a child, we had a question what to do, and he asked me, what does the doctor say? I said, we went to 2 doctors, and each one says to do the opposite thing. So he told me then, so ask a certain Rav. And there was like a smile on his face. And the way I understood it is, the Etzem I would tell you to go straight to the Rav, not to the doctors. But we have to do everything b'derech hateva. But if the 2 doctors were kind enough to contradict each other, so okay, so that was Yaitz my medical opinion. He was a Rav that knew a lot about doctors, but whatever the case may be. He said it was like the fact that the 2 doctors contradicted each other, so that was an opportunity to be able to be Saimach on Das Torah. And getting back to Isaac, he's trying to back out of a cobblestone street, he's really struggling, and suddenly there are a bunch of garbage cans in front of him. And all of a sudden, he gets out of the car, not realizing you don't do that on a Manhattan street at 3 o'clock in the morning on a lonely street. He gets out of the car to remove the garbage cans, and before he knows it, he has 2 very uncalled for passengers sitting, one in the back, pointing a gun at his head, and one to the side of him. So, the Mazukta Yiddish Kop, he convinced them that they could rob him right here, but he doesn't have much on him. He went on a date and it really empties you out, he said. But in his dormitory room in Lakewood, the boys have a lot of money. So maybe they should go there. They figured, listen, Jews have money, right? How else would they control the world, right? So how else would they control all the banks in the world? They must have money. They hears that all day, right? Makes sense. So these 2, obviously not from the biggest Chachamim, they actually drove to Lakewood. And he came out, and he came into the dorm, and boys looking at him, they said, like, who are these 2 Chaverim you just picked up? He said, these are my good friends, Mr. Ritzeach, Mr. Goslin, whatever. And Bachrim caught up pretty quickly what the situation was. So one of them went up with him, the other partner stayed downstairs with the car, and then the police came by, they asked him, what are you doing here? He said he's waiting for his partner. Your partner. Right. So anyway, There was a fight over there. It was a pretty scary situation. Well, actually, the situation was under control. It turned out that when Rav Nosson first started saying Tillim, was the first time these two jumped into the car. And when he went back, because there was one more moment of sakana, where I don't remember the exact details of the story. And I think that if you believe you're home, when a person is home, you wouldn't know. A person can ask you, in your house, what picture's on the wall? I don't know. What color is the tiles? But when you're in a station, you look around and you see things, right? When you're a guest, you notice things. That's how it is. In Yiddish, there's an expression, a gast of a while, zait a mile, right? A guest for a while sees for a mile. So I think that in how I would explain Rav Nosson's look is that when you believe you're not home, you're in a station, you're much more observant to pick up things that no one else can pick up. If you believe you're a station, you believe it's temporary, then the Rebbeinu Shalom, there's a Ruach HaKodesh, there's a Bechina, call it Siyata D'Shmaya, call it an inner hergish that shares things with you. Says, that tonight is the Yartzeit of the Ohr HaChaim HaKadosh. The Ohr HaChaim HaKadosh used to learn Hilchos Eidus every Erev Shabbos. Sounds interesting. No, Hilchos Eidus? Yes. He learned Hilchos Eidus every Erev Shabbos. Why Hilchos Eidus? Can anyone perhaps suggest why the Ohr HaChaim HaKadosh would learn Hilchos Eidus on Erev Shabbos? And the answer is because when you say Vayechilu, you're an aid. Right? That's why you have to have two people saying Vayechilu. You're an aid to Ma'aseh Bereishis. So you have to learn Hilchos Eidus. And an aid also has to do tshuva to make sure he's kosher Eidus. And that's the inyan of Erev Shabbos, doing tshuva to make sure you're kosher Eidus. I am petrified of getting the kibud of Eidei Kiddushin. That's why I tell people, give me Siddur Kiddushin. And people don't have that. I don't want to be an aid. An aid is a tremendous achrayus. What if I'm pasal Eidus? That's like a huge achrayus. So of course you have to try to do tshuva. I tell you, somebody once asked me, this was a Talmud I worked with a lot, and he was getting married. He wanted me to be, it was the only time I got this offer. He wanted me to be his Mesader Kiddushin. I said to him, do you want me to do a root canal for you? He said, no. You know how to do a root canal? I said, I don't know how to be Mesader Kiddushin. He says, Kol she'eni yedeya b'tiv gitne v'kiddushin ein lo yesik iman, right? So like, what do you want from me? So he really wanted me to be a Mesader Kiddushin. I said, I can't do something I don't know how to do. I take the achrayus. You have to know the halachas. It's not a joke. So his father called me up, and he said he has an eitzah. He's going to have a dayan, a rav, sit there, and basically I'm going to do paint by number. You know what I mean? This rav will check that the ksuba is okay. He'll make sure everything is okay, and I'll do the public ceremony, like the bracha, so I'll be the Mesader Kiddushin. In case I'm worried that, you have to know what you're doing. It's not a joke, being a Mesader Kiddushin. So there'll be a qualified Rav there. So I was beginning to think, the shlecht. It's on the pictures. It doesn't say, there's no like asterisk on the picture album. He wasn't really the Mesader Kiddushin. There was somebody there telling him. So I asked the very clever Yid. He said, don't do it. You're gonna have Agmas Nefesh the rest of your life. I said, what do you mean? He said, the first time you get Siddur Kiddushin, for the rest of your life, whenever you hear you're by a chuppah and somebody else gets Siddur Kiddushin, you go, him? Why him, right? Don't start. If you start, you're doomed. You know what I mean? Do me a favor. I took his advice, Taka, and I stayed away despite the training wheels they were going to give me. So you want to say, hey, you have to tshuva. You have to tshuva. In my koil, there was one young man, a real tmimistic young man, Everybody wanted him for Eidei Kiddushin. A real goody. Everybody wanted him for Eidei Kiddushin, to the point where it was like the joke already. He was the official aide. And I was marrying off my kids. I asked him to come to be Eid Kiddushin. Lamaisa, my mechutner already told someone else. I told him, I'm sorry. He said, so you mean I did tshuva all day for nothing? I said, maybe he's not so tmimistic. You know what I mean? So really, that the person that went to the chasana and he said his wife called and said, you were by the chuppah? Yeah. Who got Siddur Kiddushin? That and that Rav, Who got Kriyas Aksuba? It's Rosh Yeshiva. And who got Bracha Achrita? So and so. Finally she goes, and what did you get? He goes, a stomach ache. Yes. Kavod is not worth it. Trust me, it is not worth it. I've learned in my life, every drop of kavod you get, there's an equal amount of bizyonis. It cancels each other out. It's not worth it. But seriously speaking, so every Friday, the Archaim HaKadosh learned Hilchos Eidus, because he said that you have to be a kosher aid when Friday night comes. So what does that mean? I'm an aid, I'm a witness to Maaseh Bereishis? What is that supposed to mean? I'm a witness to a transaction. I'm Eidei Kedushin. Fine, I'm singled out to be the aid. What does it mean I'm a witness to Maaseh Bereishis? I'm not seeing Maaseh Bereishis. I'm maimin in Maaseh Bereishis. How could I be an aid to Maaseh Bereishis? The Archaim HaKadosh says in Parshas Mishpatim that Ein Lecha Shah V'Rega, there is no hour or moment She'ein Hashem Oise Pa'ula Im Adam, that the Rebbeinu Shalom is not doing a Pa'ula with a person. Bein B'Bchinas Gufay, Bein B'Bchinas Tzrachav. Rabbi say, this isn't Archaim HaKadosh, really has to be on your dashboard. Ein Lecha Shah V'Rega. Everyone's sitting here, or people listening on different venues, everyone has their own issues that are going on in their own lives. And you wonder, like, Rabbi Shalom, did you forget me? And the Archaim HaKadosh says that the Rebbeinu Shalom knows exactly what is going on in your life at this given moment, and how it connects, and how you interrelate with everyone around you. Again, quoting the words of the Baal Hilula of tonight's, the Archaim HaKadosh. I know that when the war, when it looked like the Nazis were coming into Eretz Yisrael and there was no one there to stop it, and all the top British generals made a vayivrach, they went on vacation. Nobody wanted to be there when Rambam and the Mufti of Jerusalem was giving over lists of Jews to the Germans. They should be ready. So they went out to the Archaim HaKadosh. They took a Sefer Torah out to the, you can only do in the greatest sakana. And the Heilige Tzaddik, the Siyatina, said that the Germans are not coming into Eretz Yisrael, and he says he sees the Shem Havaya, the Shem Yudke Vavke, on the Tzion of the Archaim HaKadosh. I'm sure there still is, if we do things right. You know, as we're talking now, there are hundreds and thousands of people by the Tzina of the Archaim HaKadosh. By the way, the Archaim HaKadosh's Matzeva is Kamat. There was one more. That's Kamat. There's a story there also, but it's Kamat, the only Matzeva that was untouched all the years that it was in the hands of the Arabs, from 1948 till 1967. There was not a single Matzeva in Har HaZeisim that was left. And the Archaim HaKadosh's Matzeva was intact. And as they were told by the locals, every time they tried attempting to knock it down, and whatever, it didn't, including the tractor turning over on people. They got the message, stay away from this one. You see it b'chush, and it's still there. So as we're talking, I had the Meshgiach once said to me, a Murdik of art, I wanted to know if I should travel to, it wasn't to the Archaim HaKadosh, it was to a different scene. But it applies over here as well. We're here in the Boston Shul, right? We're not by the Archaim HaKadosh. But never mind learning a piece of Archaim HaKadosh tonight, which would be a good idea, be ma'ir eschus. But if you have an asayin, if you're going through an asayin in your own life right now, a test, whether it's shmiras einayim, or it's watching your eyes, watching your mouth, watching your ears, and you're saying, you know, I'm giving the schus of the Archaim HaKadosh, I am holding myself back, I am not going to say something I want to say, or I will say something that I was supposed to say and I don't want to, whatever the case may be. We all know what our nisyanis are. Then you are by the Archaim HaKadosh. And that's Shem Havaya that lights up for all of us. So again, the words of the Archaim HaKadosh. And that'll explain what it means that the Archaim HaKadosh learned Hilchos Eidus every Friday. Ein lecha shah v'rega. There is no shah or rega. She'ein Hashem oise pa'ula im adam. That the Eibishter is not totally focused on you. Imagine the Situation Room in the White House, right? And they're all focused on an event that's taking place at that given moment. The most sophisticated surveillance equipment in the world, the most expensive army in the world, are all focused. That is what the Rebbeinu Shalom is for every single person on this bria at every single moment in your life. Ein lecha shah v'rega she'ein Hashem oise pa'ula im ha'adam bein b'bchinas gufoy bein b'bchinas tzracha. And your zaydas, the Chaim HaKadosh says that your grandfathers and great-grandfathers are there. They know every mitzvah you do, every avera you do. They get a message. It shines back up to them. Think about the achrayus, right? They take the extra Danish, but the whole ship is waps. You know, I'm not going to do it. I'm part of the team. We're all part of that rowing team. Every time when there's a sign of not looking at something, sign of doing the right thing. We're all part of that rowing team. Ramosha says if you look at the world right, then the entire world becomes Hechsher Mitzvah. Then the Rebbeinu Shem is there wherever we are. Misham Yikabetzcha says the Zera Shimshin, means even from the most remote, from the deepest of the deep, from the worst of the worst. There's no place in the world where HaKadosh Baruch Hu is not focused on you. Hilchas Eidus means I see you. You see me and I see you. There's an Eidus. I'm here. Eidus means, Rebbeinu Shalom, I know you are constantly recreating me. The Shloah Kodesh in this week's Parsha says a fascinating thing. He says the Neshama and the Guf, of course, contradict each other. He says the default mode, it sounds like scary words, but we'll try to explain it. The default mode of the Guf is death. The Guf itself has no life, is lifeless. The Rebbeinu Shalom is Mechadish Betuvay B'chol Yom Tov B'Maaseh Bereishis, and the Rebbeinu Shalom gives life into the Guf every single split second of our lives. But the Guf left to its own vices has no life to it. The default mode of the Neshama is life, is Nitzchias. There are times the Neshama is hidden. There are times the Neshama struggles. The Neshama within us can see through the Guf. It can convince the Guf, listen to me. There is a Rabbeinu Shalom on this world. There is a Rabbeinu Shalom that is dictating, that is watching you, that is focused on you at any given moment and is counting on you. And every Shabbos, more so than any other time, says the Kedushas Levi, there's the inyan of this Hamachadish Betuva B'chol Yom Tamid. And the way this Eidus applies itself, as the Kedushas Levi explains it, is that our emotions are directly aligned with Kaviyachal. The Rebbeinu Shalom is happy when you are happy. The Rebbeinu Shalom wants people in this world to be besimcha. There are times the Shechin has to correct us. But if I force myself, I try, I do my best to appreciate life, you're making the Rebbeinu Shalom happy. When a person is b'tzar, it's b'chol tzarasim leitzar. I remember my mother-in-law, Shalom, was diagnosed with a shver machla. And it was a week before my second son's wedding. I knew something was up. I didn't know what it was. And she didn't tell me a word. She was there by the chasana, she was the baba, till mamish after the last Sheva brachas. She waited till after the last Sheva brachas. She called me to come over to the house. My stomach was turning. I had a feeling I knew what was coming, and she told me. I said, Ma, why didn't you say anything? She said, doesn't want to disturb the chasana. This is your chasana. I didn't want to disturb the chasana. I was thinking about all the Mesiras Nefesh she went through in the war and everything else. And what kind of Mesiras, to realize the Mesiras Nefesh. So coming into Shabbos and saying, Rebbeinu Shalom, I know you want me to be happy, but I have a lot of reasons not to be happy. But I believe you want me to be happy. So help me do the things. Help me see the hashgacha in my life so I can work and generate that simcha. That is Eidus. That's the Eidus. There are times, says the Kedushas Levi in this week's Sedra, that a person suddenly is margish a simcha. You feel happy. I'm talking about without chemical assistance. You know what I mean? You feel happy, right? The Mariats, once in the middle of a Fabrang, they're in Russia in the most difficult times. Russia is being ripped apart at the seams between the Bolsheviks and the Mensheviks and the communists and the revolutions and the counter-revolutionists and the Yidden, especially the Frum Yidden, were stuck in the middle. And disaster, they ran out of vodka. So the Mariat says he was sent by his father. The whole Fabrengen was a secret Fabrengen. He said, go and please try to find me vodka. So he went, and there's no vodka to be found. It was then the story, I think it was, I'm not sure about the chronology, but it was the Tsar Nicholas, I think that was his name, one of the last Tsar. On the day of his inauguration, they decided, there were thousands of people came, and they decided to give out free beer and free booze. And for states, half of Russia showed up. And there was Matzachunga, and the word got out, probably from the back of the line, that they don't have enough. And all of a sudden, there was a pushing and a shoving and a shooting, and the Tsar, and they were shoving themselves toward the palace. And the Tsar's soldiers began to panic, and they started shooting into the crowd, okay? Which today is almost accepted, you know. They started shooting into the crowd, and hundreds of people were killed, and the party kept going. The Nicholas didn't want to stop his party. He said, what if a couple hundred people were killed in your backyard? No. That's a reason to stop a party. That was the beginning that was the start of his downfall. That gave the last thing to the rev. So the vodka wasn't to be found. And there's a couple of Yidden having a Fabrengen, right? They're being mechazik themselves. So he sees, you look hard enough, someone over here has vodka. And he met a peasant, and he's sitting, he has a bottle of vodka. So the Marriott says, sell it to him. He says, no. He says, I'll give you 20 ruble. He says, no. He says, I'll give you 50 ruble. No. I'll give you 100 ruble. He says, you're going to give me 100 ruble? And what do I have from it? He says, I drink this bottle of vodka, the whole Moscow is mine. You know what I mean? It's all mine. I imagine everything. I have millions and billions, right? Okay. So I'm not talking about with a bottle of vodka. I'm talking about sometimes we have every reason in the world not to be happy, and at a given moment we feel a certain sense of simcha. Says the Kedushas Levi, they're talking about you, Shemayim. They're happy with something that you did. Or you have an opportunity now. They're like saying, I hope he does. They're like rooting for you. Connect with your emotions. They're talking about you in Shemayim. For a fleeting second, you got it right. And that's your edus. So the TSA lines were supposed to be very, very long when there was a government shutdown, especially in Kennedy Airport. The TSA lines are supposed to be very, very long because they weren't showing up to work because there was a government shutdown and they weren't getting paid. But it's not true. Sheker v'chazav. It made stamsh. It's the Democrats. I can prove it to you because the government shutdown is over and there's still very, very long lines. Nothing changed really. So I was there and I had to make a flight. And I was supposed to have TSA pre-check. For whatever reason, I don't know, it wasn't going through. And then they come over to you and they offer you this clear, you know what it is? At first it's complimentary for the first 5 seconds, and then you add something like that. And then of the first 2 weeks, and then they try to get you to forget to cancel, whatever it is. And the bottom line is I can't afford to miss this flight. They say we'll bring you to the head of bring you straight through. How this works for money, I don't know, but okay. So they take me to a place and take off my glasses. They take a picture. They give them my passport, blah, 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 credit card number. Why do you need my credit card number? I thought it's for free. We charge you $1. The $1 is to make sure they have your credit card number so that when the promotion runs out, they can. But okay, so $1 sign. And okay, you're good to go. Go over there. That's the clear thing. You go straight in. I said, there's an hour wait over here. I just go straight in? Yeah. I said, so give me some kind of I don't know, an ID card or something, like the library card. How do they know it's me? Facial recognition. And I said, I go there, and there's like 2 people online, one ahead of me, hundreds of people online, people screaming, yelling, in the regular line. They say, you have clear? I said, yeah, all of 5 seconds, yeah. Okay, I take a picture, you're good to go. You don't even have to show your passport to the TSA agent. Somehow this clears you. And I'm trying to think because you took a picture of my face, right? I don't answer any questions, just my face. Very interesting. So I was reading up on it, and they were saying, it's getting more and more sophisticated, facial recognition. And the Gemara says, right? Kashem Baruch, you make a bracha, you see 600,000 people, you make a bracha, Baruch Chacham Harazim. Kashem She'en Partziseyim Shavais, Kacha Ein Dateyim Shavais. Our faces, no 2 people, since Sheshis Mebereshis have the same face. There are also fingerprints, right? No 2 people have the same fingerprints. Today, all mikvahs have finger. No more mikvah cards. You put your finger up against the screen. That's how you go in. In the old days, you used to say, oh, I forgot my card. Do you mind if I come in with you? Right? Now, it's very hard. I forgot my finger. Do you mind if I come in with you? It doesn't work, right? And then you call the bank, and they have something called voice recognition. And they say that voice recognition is more accurate than anything else. There are no 2 people in the world that have the same voice. And I'm just thinking, as the Rebbeinu Shalom, right? This state in all the Svarim HaKadosh. Rebbeinu Shalom creates all the people on this world, and each and every one of them have a separate shlichus. Not just all the people that are part of the current population of the world, but from Sheshis Yemei Bereshis till Mashiach comes. Every single person is an individual. Every person sitting over here is an individual that has a shlichus on this world that nobody else in the world can fulfill. You're the only one. And we come up to Shemayim like, who? Maybe I'll say I'm someone else. Maybe I'll get away with it. Maybe I'll come up to Shemayim. My name, Rebel Yoshev. How do they know? How would they know what I look like? No, you're Metzias. You don't show ID, voter ID, mail-in votes. Yes, nothing. Your Metzias is who you are. Your face is who you are. Every mitzvah that we do. So I was just thinking, so it's basically there's three things. There's eye prints, there's fingerprints, and there's voice prints, right? So our eyes, yeah, we have different kind of eyes. The eyes that are careful, what they look at, are different kinds of eyes. Eyes that are a toiv ayin are a different kind of an eye. And there's fingers, right? You give someone a shalom aleichem, how are you? How you doing? A slap on the back, v'smachsta. Or do your fingers make someone else's thing disappear? Well, where are your fingers? And then there's voice. So really it represents machshava, dibur, and maisa. It's really what it is. It says everyone's machshava, everyone's dibur, and everyone's maisa comes up to Shemayim, and we see schar mitzvah, schar aveir, aveir. Zezok the nefesh hachayim. Rav Dessler is a beautiful beer of it. You create a tangible reality. Say for time of Devar, you create a tangible reality with your mitzvahs and your aveiros. But it's you. Where how many malachim? Every mitzvah that I do, trillions of malachim? No. My face is the face of my mitzvahs. My voice is the voice of my mitzvahs. If you don't daven a marav tonight, the world's missing your marav. Hashem needs my marav. Yes. No one has your koil. Only you have your koil. You're toivayin, you're fagin, and you're looking at someone. Somebody once came to the Pnei Menachem, got online to the Pnei Menachem, and he said to him, he said he's an eye doctor, and that he's going to Europe on a conference. And he asked that he wants a bracha from the Rebbe. So the Pnei Menachem said to him, I want to ask you something. It was before Slichas. He said, you go to this conference, and I'm sure every doctor gets up there and says his chidushim, his experiences that he had over the year. Are there any times that a doctor is onto something, a certain treatment that could help, but he doesn't want it to get out until he makes sure that from a financial point, he has the patent on it? And that could take years. And as a result, this doctor is holding it to himself and not sharing it with the other doctors. So this eye doctor said, could be. So the Pnei Menachem said, this is what I want you to say to the people, okay? Tell them an old rabbi in Jerusalem said like this. Your eye doctors, an eye doctor has to be a toiv ayin. What is your purpose on this world? Make $1 more, $1 less? Be written up in some medical journal? Your job is to give. And if you have a way of instructing other doctors, informing other doctors of a mahalach, of a treatment, of a protocol that could help people, you have no right to hold it back for yourself for a second. That's what toiv ayin is. Toiv ayin is the source of bracha. And an eye doctor has to be a toiv ayin. He says he came to the conference. When it was his turn to talk, he did his best. How do you say toiv ayin in English? I don't know. Graceful. He did his best to explain it. He said, and a big doctor got up and said, I'll tell you the truth, I'm working on a certain mahalach. I was going to keep it to myself. And he said, I'm going to share it with you. I'm going to share it with you. You're right. That's the p'china of being a toiv ayin. So you don't have to be an eye doctor. Toiv ayin is how you look at your spouse. Toiv ayin is how you look at your neighbor, how you look at your brother-in-law. Everyone has what they're supposed to have. The Rebbe Hashem has my number, he has my voice, he has my face, he has my fingers, he has everything. He knows my mitzias. I don't have one drop less than what I'm supposed to have. I don't have one drop more than what I'm supposed to have. Ar Chaim HaKadosh says, what do you mean a person can curse? He says in Parshas Bilam, Bilam cursed? Rosh Hashanah, Hashem decides how much you're supposed to have. How does that work? How does an ayin hara work? So the Ar Chaim HaKadosh says, if a person is not worthy of a punishment, and all the klalos in the world, mean nothing. That person that went to this chacham, he said, I have parnasah. He says, he told him, I'll give you a blessed $1. He said, you have a cursed 100, maybe? All the curses in the world are not gonna affect you if you don't have any chatoim. But if you have chatoim, says the Rechaim HaKadosh, and the Shemayim, they judge you for punishment. But the Eibush says, the Keiler Chapayim, and the Rebbe Hashem says, hold off, don't punish him. And along comes someone else and he curses. That generates a kitrik and Shemayim. Along comes someone else and there's an ayin hara. That generates a kitrik and Shemayim. Someone is a toivayin. Yosef Atzadik was above ayin hara because of his toivayin, because he was concerned for others. So, you're learning Eli Treifus now, or trying to learn Eli Treifus. The Gemara said recently that an animal that is scared off from a heavenly thing, like lightning and thunder, his lungs shrivel, right? But if it was Medei Shemayim, his lungs could heal. On the other hand, if someone scared the animal, someone yelled at the animal, or made some koil, and frightened the animal, and his lungs shriveled, his lungs won't heal. If the fear came from Shemayim, his lungs will heal. If the fear came from another person, his lungs don't heal. Once you're the Mari de Gavart. But if a person believes even what another person does to you is also min hashemayim, no one can hurt you unless it's ongish, then you always heal. Then you always heal. Then there'll always be brach. I don't want to use them as a thing, but one of the communists, the light, I don't want to say their names. Unfortunately, they were Yidden. But the reason they said they were so against religion, because they wanted people to join the uprising. They wanted people to join the uprising against the Tsar. And they felt as long as a person has religion, he's not so threatened, he has a different world. We have to make people believe that that's it. It's either this or nothing. So, Gam Malach Ra Yana Ame. A person that has a Munah Nishkeferlach, the world is there. The world is here. So the Baal Shem Tov says, the more you want to see the Rabbeinu Shalom, then the more you become an aid, the more you become a witness to the Rabbeinu Shalom in your life. The more you have a Munah, that the Rabbeinu Shalom is waiting to see your face smile. The Rabbeinu Shalom is looking at your hands as you touch something, as you attempt to make life better for yourself. And the Rabbeinu Shalom knows only you can do it and no one else can. So everyone knows Rabbi Fischel Schachter, right? His Rabbi Fischel Schachter's Rebbe, he had several. His main Rebbe was a Yid, Rabbi Yosef Zundel of Salant. And there were three Salants, Rabbi Yosef Zundel had a son-in-law, Rabbi Shmuel Mesalant, who was the Rav of Yerushalayim for many, many years. When Rabbi Yosef Zundel Mesalant was basically a Bahaltan Tzaddik. He was officially a businessman. He wandered from place to place. Rabbi Fischel Schachter chapped who he was. He followed him around. He saw every single thing that he does. His Eiskechej, and he said he can see all Dalit Chelke Shulchan Aruch with every little thing that he does. And Rabbi Yosef Zundel, at the point that he saw people are catching on to him, he said he's going to Yerushalayim, and there no one's going to know who he is. His son-in-law, Rabbi Shmuel, could not go. His oldest son-in-law, he developed tuberculosis, came to doctors. Doctors told him, you have at best a year to live. We heard that your father-in-law went to Jerusalem, you're up high on the mountains, the air is different, maybe there you'll have 3 years to live. So he went to Yerushalayim, and he only lived for another 75 years. He was nifter at the age of 102. He was the Rav of Yerushalayim, he was nifter at the age of 102. Yosef Zundel came to Yerushalayim 196 years ago. Shmuel came 2 years later. And at first he tried to hide his identity, tried to write himself off as a vinegar salesman. And his cover was blown, and they made him the Rav of the Ashkenazim. Okay, so he had 3 daughters. One was Rav Shmuel, he had a daughter, Toiba. He had a second daughter, Henya. I think she also came married to a Yid that was on his Bezdin, his second son-in-law, Reb Uri Shapsi Nisselbaum. And Reb Shmuel and Reb Uri Shapsi were from the biggest Talmidei Chacham in Yerushalayim. He had a third daughter, she came as a girl. And there were no available Bacharim in Yerushalayim, and you have no idea what went on in those times. And at one point, he felt, he saw his daughter was going, no. He said, I have B'tachin. He told his daughter, he has B'tachin, that the next ship that arrives in Yerushalayim, your chassan is on the ship. And he had no idea when the next ship is arriving, and he had no idea who's going to be on that boat. And he came to the ship. He came. And he kept asking people, is there a bacher here? Is there a bacher? Yeah, there's a bacher. Oh, there we go. You see? Match made on the ocean. And out comes a bacher. He looked a little disheveled, looked a little tzidrudled, looked a little, one too many patches on his clothes, didn't look maybe all there. And they're saying, he's the bacher. Rabbi Yosef Zindel runs over to him, Shalom Aleichem. He says, come with me. And Rabbi Yosef Zindel says to him, as a matter of fact, he says, you want to get married? He goes, yeah. Want to marry my daughter? Sure, why not? And he takes him home and he says, no, here he is, here's the chassan. There we go. If we did things that way, there'd be a lot more shidduchim, that's for sure. And he said, who in the world is this? His name was Nosson Nota. And they got married. And Nosson Nota knew nothing. And they got him a job. He was the water carrier. you didn't need to pass too many tests to be the water carrier. One of the many water carriers in Yerushalayim, there was no running water. And people were saying, what's going to be by the Shabbos table over there? You know what I mean? What's going to be by the Shabbos table? He says, Reb Shmuel is going to say a ktsois. You know what I mean? Reb Uri is going to answer with an asivis. And Nasanat is going to say that salt needs more salt. I don't know if they had salt. The new water carrier. And when Nasanat finished his rounds, he came to shul and sat in the Besmedrash, just nodded, listening to his two brothers-in-law talk and learning, everyone talking. He just sat there. That's who he was. Until one day, after a long time, the two sons-in-law of Yosef Zindel were arguing over Pshat and Taisvis, and Nasanot was there, klatzing as usual, and suddenly he jumped up and said, No, but according to my Zayda, the Shagas Arya, the way he lists Pshat and his Gemara, your whole kasha doesn't start with it. He went, oops. And they looked at him and said, what? They didn't know that his Zayda was the Shagas Arya. And they definitely didn't know that he was capable of understanding a Shagas Arya, and that he was able to apply this Shagas Arya to that Tosfos, show that this is no, water carrier that just carries water. He's carrying a lot more than that. And Reb Shmuel Mesalan ran out of the house, ran out of the Beis Medrash, ran to his father-in-law. He wanted to run to his father-in-law and say, you're not going to believe it, father-in-law. You're not going to believe it. He said, Reb Nosin Nata is a benonshal kedoshim, an einikel the Shagas Aryeh. I think today's the Shagas Aryeh, as Yar said as well. He's an einikel of the Shagas Aryeh, and he's a Goin Olam. And Rabbi Yosef Zundel didn't flinch. He goes, of course, I had bitachon. Right? There we go. I remember once I asked the Mashgiach something. Well, I also had to with Shidduchim. And I said to him, could I rely on bitachon? I'll never forget what he answered me. He said, I don't know your level of bitachon. I can't answer you. You could rely on it, but if you have the highest level of bitachon, the chayvus levavos, you could rely on it. I don't know how much bitachon you have. I can't answer you. Right? And how much bitachon Rabbi Yosef Zundel had. Right? We know who we are. Person in his life, so every person in his life has 10 nisyonos. 42 stations, 10 nisyonos. Those are the key points in our life. When you get through that point, then there's a Yeshua. Somebody was telling me once, I remember a friend of mine, he says, I went to the country, okay. He says, it cost me $12,000 in those years. He says, I had such a problem with my bungalow, and a problem with the neighbors, and a problem with the day camps. It was like, you know how much agus nefesh I had. He said, one Shabbos afternoon, I'm sitting under the tree, and there's like a fresh air, and he says, okay, that was $12,000. There was my $12,000. That one thing? But the teretz is that, in Shemayim, it's all that breath. That breath of fresh air, the Yafa Kairas Ruach, right? In Shemayim, it's all that one fresh breath. It's all what it is. Down here in this world, every once in a while, Hashem gives us a breath. But our job is to be Eidos, to believe that wherever we are. Rav Aaron Kartlis came to Baltimore. I think it's Rav Ruderman's yard site today or tonight also. Okay, and Rav Ruderman was helping him collect money in Baltimore in those years. It was going very rough. And there was a conservative rabbi that had a dinner, and he raised $25,000 in those years. So Rav Aaron said, $25,000 in one shot. And here, so Rav Ruderman said, the Arei Miklat, right, that pointed where the Ritzeach has to run to if he kills someone b'shaygig. There were signs all over. You know why there were signs all over? So we didn't want the Ritzeach to stop people and say, by the way, I just murdered someone. Would you know where I have to go? They didn't want to kill. We don't want to hear about murder or killing. On the other hand, when it came to the Oile Regel, there were no signs. Absolutely no arrows pointing where to go. Why? Because they wanted people to come into the town and say, I'm going to be Oile Regel. Where do I go? Oh, you're going. Maybe I should join along. Forget. They wanted that. He says, give him the $25,000. You, the Banishim wants you to go from place to place. Banishim wants you to do it. To be Eidus. Today's the yard of Rabbi Lozer Raisha. Lozer Raisha was a Einikel. The Divrei Chaim took him as a Yosim, took him in and married him off. He was an Einikel of the Noam Elimelech, married him off to his own Einikel. He was, it's late, I really want to talk a lot about him, but Rabbi Lozer Raisha sent everyone to America. A lot of people didn't listen to him. He said he was nifta before World War I. He said that the earth underneath is burning in Europe. Get out of Eastern Europe. Go to America. So he said, one of his big Hasidim, he said, he was asking me, he has problems with his business. He said, I told you to go to America. So he didn't want to go. He says he was on the street and a bunch of hoodlums attacked him. They started screaming, dirty Jew. And they mamish split his head open. They were able to stitch his head. So he came back and says, my Rebbe was right, I have to go to America. So I would have listened, I would have gone with a whole head. Now I'm going with a half a head. So when he left, he once came back to his Rebbe, and he said, Rebbe, he said, I'm going to miss you. So the Rebbe told him, listen, you go to America, the Rebbeinu Shalom is in America. You stand next to the Rebbeinu Shalom, I will stand next to the Rebbeinu Shalom, we'll both be there together, right? That's the Eidos. There's a Ratzon Hashem, there's a feeling from one person to another. Shalach Kodesh says, that's why the Parsha of Yerusha is in Parshas Pinchas. That there's a Pchina that even if a person's not here in this world, you're doing the right thing, you have a father in Shemayim that wants you to do the right thing, you connect with him. So in conclusion, the Rechaim HaKadosh, somebody when he was in Yerushalayim, somebody came to him and said, Rebbe, I think it was a family member, if I don't remember exactly, he said, I have no parnasa, no parnasa meant no parnasa. So the Rechaim HaKadosh wrote something down on a piece of paper. He wrote it on a klaf, and he wrote it in Ksav Hashiras. And the Rechaim HaKadosh told him, go to the Koisel HaMaravi and put it in between the cracks. And this person started running to the Koisel HaMaravi, and wind started to blow, and he's holding on to this piece of paper for dear life, and his hat flew off. And he was so scared that he's going to drop the paper that he didn't run after his hat. He just let his hat go. And at the point that he was going a little bit more, and the winds were getting stronger and stronger, and that his yarmulke flew off, so he tried to grab his yarmulke, and the paper flew out of his hand, and he couldn't find it. He came back to the Rechaim HaKadosh. The Rechaim HaKadosh says, that was an Eis Rotz, and I can't give you another paper. But they found that paper. In Yerushalayim, they found that paper. And they opened it up. Were they supposed to? Probably not. And these were the words that the Rechaim HaKadosh wrote. He's writing to the Shechina HaKadosh. And he writes, Achoisi Re'isi, Yoinosi Samasi, from the Psukim and Shir HaShirim of the most intimate relationships. Avakshech berachmim, I ask you berachmim, Lashpia Parnasa, to be Mashpia Parnasa Toiva, Leploini ben Ploini to so-and-so ben so-and-so, and the Rechaim HaKadosh signed his name. It wasn't Bashet. They should be able to tuck it into the Kaisel. Maybe the Inyan that it wasn't Bashet for it to be tucked into the Kaisel is that the Eibishter wanted that piece of paper to fly around. The fact that it flies around means it's available to everybody. And a person that sees the Rebbeinu Shalom in his life and wants to see the Rebbeinu Shalom in his life, as difficult as it is, and he learns Hilchas Eidos, and he says, Rebbeinu Shalom, I know you're there. I know you know my voice like no one else does. You know my eyes like no one else does. You know me and everything I'm going through in my life like no one else does. Then this pisk of the Rechaim HaKadosh, Chaysi Rayasi Yenasi Samasi Vakshech Berachmem Lashpir Panasa Taiva Leploini Ben Ploini, then you become that Ploini Ben Ploini. The Shem Avaya that glowed on the caver of the Rechaim HaKadosh. And if you study World War II, it doesn't make sense that the Germans didn't come into Eretz Yisrael. Didn't make any sense. A lot of things right now, when you look at the survival of Klal Yisrael, it doesn't make sense. But the Rechaim HaKadosh shows us, when the Shem Avaya shines, things don't have to make sense. And the Eibush is a help, and that this should be a source and a yisoid for the Geula Shleima. And that next year, I'll ask you, how was your trip to Yerushalayim?
Shem Eigen Shiur Torah Life, you big Ashikoyach to Rabbi Fischel Schachter for inspiring Joshua. To have the great schluss of sponsoring a share, call Eigen Shiur Torah at 718-851-8651 or email ist@yeshiva.com. We'd like to give a big Ashikoyach to Rabbi Parnas for sponsoring tonight's share. Ashikoyach go on for coming. Kananya ben Akashem, Merotz HaKadosh Baruch Hu L'Zakis, Es Yisrael L'Figir Hebron Torah Mitzvah Shenem Adonai Chofes Aman Tzidka Yagdol Torah V'Yader. Hey. Hey.